Welcome back to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome back to the show. This is episode number 254 and I'm your host, Brother Adam Thayer. This week's episode is brought to you by Banker's Best Beard Products, who make beard oils and balms to help keep your Masonic goatee manageable. Stop by the website to grab a coupon code to get 20% off of your order, and part of your purchase will come back to the show. We have some great papers lined up this week, so without further ado, let's get right into our first paper. The Two Pillars by H. Jordan Rosoki, 32nd degree. Published January 1964 in the New Age magazine. The fellow craft is introduced to the wonders of his world of art and science through portals flanked by two massive pillars. Detailed description of these pillars in the Book of Kings indicates a style of design common to Egyptian architecture, where a pillar terminates in a capital representing a conventionalized lotus blossom or the seed pod of that sacred lily. Such twin pillars are frequently found among Egyptian and Sumerian archaeological remains. The pillars of King Solomon's temple, and in fact that entire group of structures, were the work of Phoenician artists, according to the biblical account. From other sources, we gather that these same designers and craftsmen, initiated Dionysiac architects, were responsible for the magnificent palaces and temples at Byblos, the cultural and aesthetic center of ancient Phoenicia. The Phoenician realm occupied an area roughly the same as that of modern Syria and Lebanon, and in biblical accounts is usually called Tyre, from the name of its then capital city. Byblos, also known as Gubal or Jebel, the present-day village of Jebail, was particularly famous for architects and sculptors. The twin pillars symbolize the dual nature of life and death, positive and negative, or rather active establishment and passive endurance, male and female, light and dark, good and evil, uniting in a central point of equilibrium, the apex of an equilateral triangle, a circle between two parallel uprights. Isis represented standing between two pillars of opposing polarity, the Ark of the Covenant between two cherubim, Christ crucified between two thieves, are all symbols of the same Trinity, the completeness and perfection of deity. That the twin pillars represent the conventional symbol for Gemini, third sign of the zodiac, is no accident, but rather due to the common ancestry of the two apparently unrelated symbols. In some lectures, the pillars are said to be 35 cubits high, the height given in 2 Chronicles, King James Version. Another version of the same source gives the height as 120 cubits. Since the height of the first or outer chamber was probably no more than 30 cubits, the measurement given in 1 King, 18 cubits, seems more likely to be correct. The addition of map globes atop the pillars is a modern invention, with little biblical or other authority, and serving little purpose but to permit the lecturer to harp upon the advantages of studying astronomy, geography, etc. Worthy pursuits, but wholly unrelated to the symbolism of the pillars. Whether the three chambers of the temple were connected by stairs is debatable. The best-informed scholars believe the temple roof was flat, in which case the successively decreasing heights of the chambers, plus the somewhat sloping configuration of the site, would require approach and connection by means of either stairways or of some sort of ladder and trapdoor arrangement. Certainly the fantastically elaborate, many-storied versions of the temple depicted by some well-intentioned but ill-informed Bible illustrators and Masonic artists are so illogical and at variance with the few known facts and testimony of both the Bible and history as to seem the figments of a disordered imagination. Josephus stated that the temple was of Grecian style, which implies entablature and consequently a flat roof, although he had the cart before the horse, since Greek architecture was derived from Phoenician, not the reverse. In any case, the stairway of our lectures is purely symbolic, consisting as it does of the significant numbers 3, 5, and 7. In such a series, 3 symbolizes such qualities as peace, friendship, justice, piety, temperance, and virtue. 5 represents light, health, and vitality. 7 is a symbol of control, judgment, government, and religion. I hope you enjoyed a little bit of a more thorough look at the Middle Chamber lecture. We, in our lodges, at least here in Nebraska, we give that lecture pretty quickly, and then we don't really ever come back to it. There's such a wealth of knowledge there. All right, our next piece is entitled Burnouts and Buffets by Bill Hosler, past master. I've just finished reading a piece written by fellow Midnight Freemason contributor, my friend and brother Robert Johnson, called Is the Honeymoon Over? As I sat here reading his work, I began to notice myself nodding my head in agreement with every word RJ had written. I have a rather unique position in the craft. I'm not an old Mason, but I'm not a new guy either. At the time I'm writing this piece, I became an entered apprentice 14 years ago. From the time I signed my petition, I couldn't wait until I was a Master Mason. Before the ink was dry on my signature, I was looking at Masonic books and looking at Masonic rings. I couldn't believe how slow the petition process was, and the thought of waiting between degrees was agony. The night I was finally raised, I couldn't believe I had finally made it. I was a full-fledged, bona fide Mason. I began to feel like a dog who had caught the car. I caught it, now what do I do with it? Luckily, my question was answered before I exited the lodge room. In nearly each hand I shook in congratulations, another hand contained a petition for another Masonic body. From the Shriners to the Scottish Rite and York Rite, I had an application for all of them. I placed them in my pocket and went home. My mind was on overload with all I had seen and had done that night. Within the next 3 months, I had become a member of everything. The Shriners, the Scottish Rite, and the York Rite, along with such groups as the Philalethes Society. My wallet began to explode with dues cards. Once the dues cards were in place, the offices came. My first lodge meeting as a Master Mason, I became Junior Steward, and since I had shown the brethren I have an ability to memorize, I also received multiple pieces of ritual to learn. I was asked if I wouldn't mind filling a chair in one of the York Rite bodies. In my zeal, I agreed, and I received an office in body of the local York Rite, and with the jewels of office came even more ritual to memorize. I can honestly say I gave Masonry my all. I had a meeting nearly every night for almost 7 years. I became a past master and a past high priest in my Royal Arch chapter. Along the path, I picked up other responsibilities. I was a member of a Grand Lodge committee, and I became a webmaster for the Grand York Rite while I gathered jobs within my local shrine temple. I can honestly say I loved most every minute of it. But with problems within my family and my job, the burnouts set in. Real life began to invade my Masonic fantasy. The 24-inch gauge I had thrown away came back with a vengeance. The politics I once shrugged off began to anger me. The pieces of ritual I had been juggling for 4 different Masonic bodies no longer came easy to me. The representation of King Solomon's temple I built within myself fell apart. I went into a Masonic funk. I guess it could be called a period of Masonic darkness. Just as Brother RJ wrote, Masonic Burnout set in. For the longest time, I was like everyone else. I thought burnout was a bad thing. But, much like an old forest fire removes much rubbish and allows new life to set in, maybe Masonic burnout can be useful as well. If you go to a drag race, people talk about burnouts as a positive thing. A burnout is when you make your rear wheels spin as fast as you can while sitting in place with your foot on the brake. When a drag racer brings his car to the racetrack in his preparations to race, he will intentionally burn out his tires, which gets his tires warm and helps create traction, which, if done properly, can be the difference between winning the race or losing. As I'm sure you've been told many times, Masonry is a marathon, not a sprint. That is all well and true, but if you don't get warmed up and gain traction, you will fail at that race. Why not try a little of everything, and find out what parts of Masonry you like, and discover the ones that aren't for you? Much like an all-you-can-eat buffet, the first trip most people mound their plates full with as many types of dishes as they can heap on. When they return to the buffet a second time, they have a better idea of what foods they want to eat, and only fill their plate with the foods they have found they like. After a period of Masonic inactivity and self-reflection, I got my life back on track, and began to think about the parts of Freemasonry I liked and missed, and the parts I could live without. I realized that being approached with the possibilities of grand offices and the honors I received gave me a swelled head. I lost my perspective. I began to look at the fraternity in a different way. I also discovered, thanks to Brother Robert Johnson, I enjoyed writing about Masonic topics. My burnout period also provided experiences for writing. It allows me to use the experiences as teachable moments. Don't get me wrong, I'm not advocating you take your zeal for Freemasonry and fill every night with a different meeting. I advocate moderation, not excess. Use your experience to find your place within your fraternity. If you find your place, you are more likely to get the traction you will need to make that sprint into a marathon. If you only take one thing away from this piece, it's don't quit. You join this fraternity for a reason. Don't stop searching until you find it. Don't let the bickering or the politics or even some of the silly rules you find discourage you and make you demit. All of these silly things will eventually go away. Masonry is just like life. There will be things you love and things you hate. Just take it all in stride and make the fraternity yours. Now, if you enjoyed Brother Bill's writing, you can read him and many of today's top authors on the Midnight Freemasons blog, publishing new articles Monday, Wednesday, and Friday of every week. Okay, last and certainly not least, we have a piece that I am very excited to read called Commentary on Amos chapter 7, verses 7 to 8, with 7-9 by Brother Nick Johnson. I've been spending the year reading the Bible from cover to cover. My wife and I started reading the Bible when our church started a group to read the Bible in a year. It's been a fantastic ride and has given me a better perspective on my own volume of sacred law. Because of this desire to understand more, I've been reading blogs and listening to podcasts on the Bible. One of my favorite podcasts is Sermon Brainwave, made in conjunction with Working Preacher. It's a podcast for pastors by pastors that is produced and hosted by several faculty members from Lutheran Seminary, the local Lutheran seminary here. The host focuses on the readings from Revised Common Lectionary. Today's RCL readings included a verse that we as Masons are very well acquainted with, Amos chapter 7, verses 7 to 8. Thus he showed me, and behold, the Lord stood upon a wall made by a plumb line, with a plumb line in his hand. And the Lord said unto me, Amos, what seest thou? And I said, a plumb line. Then said the Lord, behold, I will set a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel. I will not again pass by them any more. Now the next verse says, and the high places of Isaac shall be desolate, and the sanctuaries of Israel shall be laid waste, and I will rise against the house of Jeroboam with the sword. That last bit gets left off in Masonry, but I think it's important. There's a commentary on the website written by Professor Tyler Mayfield, which points to this. The plumb line functions to keep the wall vertically straight during construction. The plumb line uses lead, Latin for lead is plumbum, at the end of a string to judge how the wall is measuring up. It helps maintain the integrity of the building by providing a vertical reference point. I'll admit when I first heard this particular verse, I assumed that, then said the Lord, behold, I will set a plumb line in the midst of my people Israel, I will not again pass by them any more, was a call to calm them, like God's use of the rainbow to seal the Noah covenant. But I, and I'm sure many Masons, are quite incorrect in this understanding. When we say that he will not pass by this way anymore, we are describing a time when God sought to measure rectitude and was left wanting. The high places and sanctuaries have been polluted and are now fair game to war and desolation. Israel stopped measuring itself against the working tool shown to Amos and is left without help. The meaning is very different, and we should understand it as such. I think this is an important lesson for us, especially as fellow crafts. We are in constant need to measure ourselves against what we are doing in our life. The fellow craft, being the day laborer, is actively setting the stones and measuring his life according to his set of working tools. The fellow craft stage is our active life, our time to put in the most work. We should never turn away from the plumb, like to and about those that Amos is prophesying. It is our constant care. In Lodge, our junior warden stands symbolically as the representation of morality, of rectitude of life. It is his duty to submit Masonic charges when needed, and ensures that the brothers act within the bounds of proper action when not in Lodge. He is the first officer elected, yet remains on the same level as his brethren, at least in lodges that use risers to differentiate. We all carry the plumb with us no matter where we go, because it is always at our level. I think the closing charge, something not often read in lodges here in Minnesota, should be given by the junior warden. It defines our purpose, and is probably the greatest lecture ever written to describe why we don our aprons every month. And since the junior warden is placed symbolically at the same level as the rest of his brethren, it makes sense that he, like all the brethren on the sidelines, carries the tool with which all Masons should look to use first. Let's use the plumb often to ensure that he will continue to pass by us and remain with us in this great work called Freemasonry. I'd like to leave all of you with the end of the closing charge. Finally, brethren, be ye all of one mind, live in peace, and may the God of love and peace delight to dwell with and bless you. Alright, and if you enjoyed that piece by Brother Nick, be sure to check out the Masonic Roundtable, which goes live on Tuesday nights at 10/9 Central on YouTube. He's one of the contributors on there. That's all for this week. Be sure to check out our great Masonic sponsors available on the website, who are helping to offset the cost of keeping high-quality Masonic education available to you at no cost. Until we speak again, I'm Brother Adam, and this is Whence Came You.
You've been listening to Whence Came You, a Masonic podcast featuring research papers and discussions related to Freemasonry. Be sure to join us for our next edition.